Hi there, my name is Nick Miner. This is Speech 3. All right, thank you all very much for coming to my speech this evening. Today I would like to show you how hearing parents do not actually have the right to implant their deaf children with cochlear implants. First off, I'll show you how cochlear implants do not fix hearing, but merely amplifies it. Next, I'll demonstrate how cochlear implants are a lifetime of commitments that the children didn't ask for. Finally, I'll show you how gaining a botched version of hearing will still subject the children to a identity crisis and isolation from both the mainstream and the deaf world. Jumping in here first, cochlear implants do not actually fix hearing, but merely amplifies it. What I mean by that is we have the author Thomas Holcomb who teaches us that it is a similar scenario to a hearing person of putting a boombox up to your ear with the speaker blazing at high volume and asking you to distinguish where everything is coming from, who's saying it, how it works, and having it just work 100% of the time. It's very, very similar. After years and years of therapy, children are still struggling. Most children who spend their lives going through speech therapy and traditional therapy often end up academically behind. Miranda L. Jansen conducted a study in Hanover, Germany of over 100 deaf children. Her hypothesis was that if we use more, meaning bilateral cochlear implants instead of just one, then they'll have a greater chance of learning to speak, distinguish what sound is, and how a normal hearing person would function. Her study was ultimately a bust because what ended up being the conclusion was it didn't matter how many cochlear implants, but it mattered how long. So it was them getting used to it instead of them having more technology shoved in their heads. Next, cochlear implants are a lifetime of commitment that the children did not ask for. And what we mean by this, Thomas Holcomb again spoke out and said that technology is always changing, just like anything else in this world. There are additional channels that need to be put in, magnets need to be replaced, the actual implant itself has to be taken out. Hearing parents have the misconception that they'll give their children one surgery at a very young age, they'll forget all about it, and then it'll be good forever, and then they'll just be perfectly normal like every other little boy and girl. No, it's completely false. Next, we have Gene F. Andrews and others who wrote the book Deaf Culture. In 1993, the National Association of the Deaf noticed that cochlear implants were on the rise from hearing parents into deaf children. They publicly spoke out and said, no, this is not the way things should be done. We need to give them sign language, give them culture, give them a place to belong. However, their words eventually fell, ironically, on deaf ears. So they changed their plea. If you're going to implant your children with cochlear implants, make sure you are welcoming sign language into your home as well. Finally, how gaining a botched version of hearing is still going to subject the children to isolation and identity crisis between both the mainstream and the deaf community. Laura L. Malden, in her book Made to Hear, was a hearing mother who was faced with the choice of implanting her deaf child. What she ultimately ended up recommending was ignoring the doctor's recommendation that she fought so tediously against for constant cochlear implant, nothing else. There's no other alternative. And simply introduce the children into the deaf community because once her child began to grow and flourish, she was welcomed with open arms and kind hearts. Furthering Laura's research, she put out that the importance of children finding a role model at a young age is vitally important for the spiritual, mental, and just emotional well-being of a child. Yes, they may be able to hear a little bit better, but without that connection to other people who struggle just as they do, they're going to feel totally alone. In conclusion, I have tried to convince you today that hearing parents should never have the right to implant their deaf children with cochlear implants. First, I showed you how cochlear implants do not actually fix hearing, it merely amplifies it. Next, I explained to you that cochlear implants are a lifetime commitment that the children did not ask for. And finally, I demonstrated how gaining a botched version of hearing still subject the children to a world of isolation and identity crisis from both the mainstream and the hearing community. Thank you all very much for your time. I appreciated your attendance. You have a wonderful evening.